Thanksgiving. I ate in the laundry room. She's used to leftovers, my sister said. Then a limo pulled up. Having you here listening to me means a lot. Watch until the end and let me know in the comments which city you're watching from. I'm really curious to see how far my story is reaching. I stood on the front porch of my childhood home, staring at the brass door knocker I'd touched 1,000 times before. Through the frosted glass, I could see the warm glow of the dining room chandelier and hear the familiar sounds of Thanksgiving preparation. My stomach churned, but not from hunger. The door swung open before I could knock. "Oh, Brittany, you're here." My mother's voice carried that familiar tone, the one that always made me feel like an inconvenience rather than a daughter coming home for the holidays. "Hi, Mom." I forced a smile, holding up the small pumpkin pie I'd bought from the grocery store. "I brought dessert." She glanced at the store-bought pie with barely concealed disappointment. "That's nice, honey. Come in." The house smelled like turkey and stuffing, exactly like it had every Thanksgiving for the past 25 years. But something felt different this time. Colder. More distant. Madison's laughter echoed from the dining room, followed by my father's booming voice telling one of his old college stories. My sister had always been the center of attention, the golden child who could do no wrong. At 28, she was everything my parents had dreamed of, a successful corporate lawyer married to Trevor, a cardiologist. They lived in a beautiful suburban home with their perfect golden retriever and their perfect 5-year plan. And then there was me, Brittany. Madison appeared in the hallway, her perfectly styled blonde hair catching the light. She looked stunning in her cream-colored cashmere sweater and dark jeans that probably cost more than my rent. "You made it." The hug she gave me felt rehearsed, like something she'd practiced in the mirror. When she pulled back, her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Where should I put this?" I held up the pie again. "Oh, just leave it on the kitchen counter. We have plenty of dessert already." Madison waved dismissively. "Come meet Trevor's parents. They're visiting from Connecticut." I followed her toward the dining room, but stopped short when I saw the table. It was set for 8 people, with Mom's best china and the crystal glasses that only came out for special occasions. Fresh flowers sat in the center, surrounded by flickering candles. It looked like something from a magazine. "Brittany, you remember Dr. and Mrs. Whitman," Madison said, gesturing to an older couple who looked like they'd stepped out of a country club catalog. "Of course," I smiled politely, shaking their hands. "Nice to see you again. Brittany works in, what is it again?" Madison's voice had that edge to it, the one that always preceded something cruel. "I'm a freelance graphic designer," I said quietly. "How creative, Mrs. Whitman said with the kind of smile that wasn't really a smile at all. My father cleared his throat from his position at the head of the table. "Well, why don't we all sit down? The turkey's getting cold." I looked around the table, counting the place settings again. 8 chairs, 8 plates, 8 wine glasses. My eyes searched for my spot, but every chair had a name card written in Madison's perfect cursive. "Dad, where am I sitting?" The silence that followed felt like it lasted forever. Madison and Trevor exchanged a look that made my stomach drop. My mother suddenly became very interested in adjusting the flower arrangement. "Well," my father said slowly, "we thought you might be more comfortable in the kitchen. You know, more casual." "The kitchen?" "Actually," Madison spoke up, her voice bright and cheerful like she was announcing good news. "We set up a nice spot for you in the laundry room. There's a TV in there now, and you'll have plenty of space." I stared at her, waiting for the punchline, waiting for someone to laugh and say they were kidding. But no one was laughing. "The laundry room," I repeated. "It's not a big deal, Britt," Madison said, using the nickname she knew I hated. "She's already used to getting the leftovers anyway." The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt heat rise in my cheeks as Dr. and Mrs. Whitman shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. Trevor studied his wine glass like it held the secrets of the universe. "She already is used to getting the leftovers," Madison continued, as if I wasn't standing right there. "It's not like this is anything new." My mother finally looked up from the flowers. "Madison, that's enough." But it wasn't enough. It was never enough. This was just the latest in a lifetime of moments where I'd been made to feel like I didn't belong in my own family. I stood there for another few seconds, looking at the 8-place settings, the beautiful table, the family that had just told me I wasn't welcome to join them. The turkeys smelled amazing. The wine glasses caught the candlelight perfectly. Everything looked exactly like a Norman Rockwell painting. Everything except me. "You know what?" I said finally, my voice surprisingly steady. "The laundry room sounds perfect." I turned and walked toward the back of the house, leaving behind the warm glow of the dining room and the sound of conversation resuming as if nothing had happened. As if I had never been there at all. I sat on the plastic folding chair my mother had set up next to the washing machine, staring at the paper plate in my lap. The laundry room smelled like fabric softener and that musty scent old houses get in the corners where no one ever cleans. The TV mounted on the wall was showing some old sitcom with the volume turned down low. This wasn't new. Madison was right about that, even if her words had cut deep. I had been getting the leftovers my entire life. I remembered my 16th birthday. Madison had gotten a brand new Honda Civic with a big red bow on the roof. I'd gotten a $50 gift card to Target and a lecture about responsibility. When I asked about driving lessons, my father had said maybe next year, when we could afford it. But 6 months later, they'd somehow found the money for Madison's spring break trip to Cancun. The turkey was dry. It always was when it had been sitting out too long, waiting for everyone else to finish their first helpings before I got mine. I chewed slowly, listening to the muffled sounds of laughter coming from the dining room. Through the thin walls, I could hear Trevor telling a story about some medical conference he'd attended. Everyone was hanging on his every word like he was delivering the cure for cancer instead of just talking about a boring work trip. Madison would be sitting there beaming, basking in the reflected glory of being married to someone so important. I thought about my own job, designing logos and websites for small businesses. It wasn't glamorous, but I was good at it. Really good. I'd built up a steady client base and was finally making enough to live comfortably in my one-bedroom apartment across town. But when I tried to tell my parents about landing a big contract with a local restaurant chain, my mother had just nodded politely and changed the subject to Madison's latest promotion. The memory that always hurt the most was from when I was 12. Madison was 15 and had just been accepted to the Honor Society at her high school. My parents threw her a celebration dinner, invited the whole extended family, even hired a photographer. That same week, I'd won first place in the county art contest. When I showed them my ribbon and the newspaper clipping with my picture, my father had glanced up from his paper just long enough to say, "That's nice, honey," before going back to reading. I'd kept that newspaper clipping in my bedroom for years, until one day I found it in the trash. My mother was cleaning out old papers, she'd said. Didn't realize it was important. The worst part was how normal it all felt. This casual cruelty, this systematic exclusion. It had been happening for so long that even I had started to accept it as just the way things were. Brittany gets the scraps. Brittany sits at the kids' table until she's too old for the kids' table, then Brittany sits alone. Brittany doesn't get invited to family photos because she never quite looks right. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through Madison's Instagram. There she was, posting pictures of the beautiful Thanksgiving table. The candlelight, the flowers, the smiling faces of our parents and the Whitmans. 8 people gathered around that perfect table. I wasn't in a single photo. The caption read, "So grateful for family time and making new memories with the people who matter most." The people who matter most. Not people like me, apparently. I set the phone down and took another bite of the dry turkey. In the dining room, someone clinked a glass and my father's voice rose above the others, making a toast about family and gratitude. Through the wall, I heard him say something about being blessed with such wonderful daughters, and everyone laughed and applauded. For a moment, I almost thought he might mention me. Almost thought he might say something about both his daughters, or invite me to join them for the toast. But the moment passed, and the conversation moved on to Trevor's golf game. I finished eating in silence, rinsing my paper plate in the laundry room sink afterward. The dishes in the dining room would be real china that my mother would wash carefully by hand. Mine went straight into the garbage. As I was getting ready to leave, I heard footsteps in the hallway. Madison appeared in the doorway, looking slightly flushed from wine and attention. "Hey," she said, leaning against the doorframe. "You're not leaving already, are you?" "Yeah, I should get going." "Come on, Britt.
Don't be like that.
We're about to do pie and coffee." I looked at her perfect face, her perfect hair, her perfect life. "Will there be room at the table?" She had the decency to look uncomfortable for about half a second. "Look, it's just that the Whitmans are really important to Trevor's career and I'm an embarrassment." "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." Madison sighed like I was being unreasonable. Like I was the one causing problems. "You know what your problem is, Brittany? You take everything so personally. Not everything is about you." She was right about one thing.
This wasn't about me.
It never had been. It was about them, about their image, about maintaining the perfect family picture that I had never quite fit into. I grabbed my jacket from the chair and headed for the back door. Tell everyone I said goodbye. But I knew she wouldn't. By the time she got back to the dining room, she'd already forgotten I was ever there. As I walked to my car, I could see them through the dining room window. They were all laughing about something, passing around dessert plates and coffee cups. They looked so happy, so complete. And for the first time in my life, I realized they looked exactly the same whether I was there or not. I was halfway to my car when I heard it, the low purr of an expensive engine turning onto our quiet suburban street. I glanced back toward the house, then stopped in my tracks. A sleek black limousine was gliding down the street like something from another world. In this neighborhood of minivans and SUVs, it looked completely out of place. The kind of car that belonged in downtown Manhattan, not in front of my parents' modest two-story colonial. The limo pulled up to the curb directly in front of the house and came to a silent stop. I stood frozen by my beat-up Honda Civic, my keys still clutched in my hand, watching as the rear window rolled down just a fraction. I couldn't see inside, but I had the strangest feeling that whoever was in there was looking directly at me. Through the dining room window, I could see the dinner party had noticed too. My father was standing up from his chair, craning his neck to get a better view. Madison had moved to the window, her face pressed against the glass like a kid at Christmas. The driver's door opened first. A man in a crisp black suit and chauffeur's cap stepped out, adjusted his tie, and walked around to the passenger side with military precision. He was older, maybe in his 60s, with silver hair and the kind of posture that spoke of years of formal training. The passenger door opened, and another man emerged. This one was younger, probably in his 40s, wearing an expensive charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than I made in 3 months. He carried a leather briefcase and had that particular air of authority that came with serious money and serious power. They both turned and looked directly at me. My heart started beating faster. I glanced around, wondering if maybe they were looking at something behind me, but there was nothing there except Mrs. Henderson's garden gnomes and a fire hydrant. The man in the gray suit said something to the chauffeur, who nodded and gestured toward me. Then they both started walking in my direction. I felt like I was in some kind of weird dream. People like this didn't come to our neighborhood. People like this definitely didn't come looking for people like me. "Excuse me," the man in the suit called out when he was about 10 feet away. His voice was smooth, educated, the kind of accent that came from expensive schools and country clubs. "Are you Brittany Thompson?" I nodded, not trusting my voice to work properly. "My name is Richard Blackwood," he said, extending his hand for a formal handshake. "I'm a partner at Blackwood, Sterling and Associates. This is James, my driver. We've been looking for you." Looking for me. The words didn't make sense. Law firms like Blackwood, Sterling and Associates didn't look for freelance graphic designers who lived in studio apartments and ate ramen 3 nights a week. "I'm sorry," I managed to say. "I think there might be some mistake." Richard Blackwood smiled, but it wasn't condescending. It was almost kind. "I understand this must be confusing. Could we speak privately? What we need to discuss is rather sensitive in nature." Behind me, I could hear the front door of the house opening. Footsteps on the porch. My entire family was probably filing out to see what was happening, drawn by the same morbid curiosity that made people slow down to look at car accidents. "Brittany?" My father's voice carried across the yard. "Is everything all right?" I turned to see all of them standing on the front porch, my parents, Madison, Trevor, even Dr. and Mrs. Whitman. They were all staring at the limousine like it had just landed from outer space. "Everything's fine, Mr. Thompson," Richard called back politely. "We just need to speak with your daughter about a legal matter." A legal matter. Those 3 words made my stomach drop to somewhere around my knees. What kind of legal matter could I possibly be involved in? I paid my taxes, never got so much as a speeding ticket, hadn't even kept a library book overdue since high school. What kind of legal matter? Madison's voice was sharp, suspicious. She was already moving down the porch steps, her lawyer instincts kicking in. Nothing happened in our family without Madison knowing about it. "I'm afraid that's confidential," Richard said firmly but politely. "This concerns Miss Thompson directly, and we're required to speak with her privately first." The way he said it left no room for argument. Madison stopped in her tracks, looking frustrated for the first time in years. "Brittany," my mother called out. "What's going on? What have you done? What have you done? Not are you okay, or do you need help?" Just the immediate assumption that whatever this was, it had to be my fault. "I haven't done anything," I called back, hearing the defensiveness in my own voice that I'd been trying to suppress for 25 years. Richard Blackwood stepped closer to me, lowering his voice. "Miss Thompson, I know this is unusual, but what we need to discuss with you is quite important. And quite private. Would you be willing to come with us? We can have you back within the hour, or we can arrange to meet somewhere else at your convenience." I looked at the limousine, then back at my family standing on the porch like a panel of judges waiting to render their verdict. Madison was practically vibrating with curiosity and frustration. My parents looked worried, but not the kind of worried that comes from love. The kind that comes from wondering what embarrassment their disappointing daughter had brought to their doorstep now. "Miss Thompson?" Richard prompted gently. I looked at him again, really looked at him. His eyes were kind but serious. Whatever this was about, it was big. Important enough to send a partner from what was obviously a very high-end law firm to track me down on Thanksgiving Day. "Okay," I heard myself say. "I'll come with you." The reaction from the porch was immediate. Madison started down the steps again. My mother made a sound of protest, and my father's voice rose above them all. "Now wait just a minute." But Richard was already opening the limousine door for me, and I was climbing inside before I could change my mind. The interior was all cream-colored leather and polished wood, with a small bar and what looked like a phone and computer setup that probably cost more than my car. As we pulled away from the curb, I caught a glimpse of my family still standing on the porch, watching us drive away with expressions of shock and confusion. For the first time in my entire life, I was the one leaving them behind with unanswered questions. The ride to downtown took 20 minutes, but it felt like hours. Richard Blackwood sat across from me in the limousine, occasionally making polite conversation about the weather or asking if I was comfortable, but I could tell he was preparing for something big. Something that required the right setting, the right moment. We pulled up to a gleaming office tower that I recognized from the city's skyline, but had never been inside. The kind of building where you needed an appointment just to walk through the lobby. Richard's office was on the 32nd floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking view of the city. The furniture was all dark wood and leather, the kind of place where million-dollar deals were made over handshakes and aged whiskey. "Please sit down," he said, gesturing to one of the chairs facing his massive mahogany desk. "Can I offer you something to drink? Coffee, water, something stronger?" "Water's fine," I managed, my mouth suddenly dry as dust. He poured 2 glasses from a crystal pitcher, then settled into his chair across from me. For a long moment, he just looked at me, studying my face like he was trying to solve a puzzle. "Miss Thompson," he began finally, "what I'm about to tell you is going to be difficult to process. I want you to know that we've verified everything multiple times, and there is absolutely no doubt about the facts I'm going to share with you." My hands were shaking slightly as I reached for the water glass. "Okay. 25 years ago, you were adopted as an infant by Robert and Linda Thompson. The words hit me like a physical blow. I set the water glass down hard, some of it sloshing onto the polished wood of his desk. I'm sorry, what? You were adopted, Miss Thompson. The people you've known as your parents your entire life are not your biological parents. I stared at him, waiting for him to smile and tell me this was some kind of elaborate joke. But his expression remained serious, compassionate even. That's impossible, I whispered. I look like them. I mean, not exactly, but you don't look like them at all, Richard said gently. You never have. And if you think about it honestly, I believe you've always known something wasn't quite right. He was right. I had always felt like an outsider in my own family. Not just because of the way they treated me, but something deeper. Something I'd never been able to put my finger into words. Your biological mother was a woman named Catherine Ashford, Richard continued. Does that name mean anything to you? I shook my head, but something about it did sound familiar. Like something I'd heard on the news or read in a magazine. Catherine Ashford was the founder and CEO of Ashford Industries. She built it from nothing into one of the largest privately held companies in the country. Real estate, technology, hospitality. At the time of her death 3 months ago, her personal net worth was estimated at $2.8 billion. $2.8 billion. The number was so large it didn't even seem real. She never married, Richard went on. Never had any other children. She spent her entire adult life building her empire, but she never forgot about the daughter she gave up for adoption when she was just 17 years old. Me, I said, the word coming out as barely more than a breath.
You.
She hired private investigators to find you when you turn 18, but she made them promise never to interfere with your life unless something happened to her. She wanted you to have the choice to contact her or not. I felt like I was drowning, like the air in the room had suddenly become too thick to breathe. She left everything to you, Miss Thompson. The entire company, all of her assets, her properties, her investments. Everything. You are now the sole owner of a business empire worth nearly $3 billion. The room started spinning. I gripped the arms of the chair, trying to anchor myself to something solid. There's more, Richard said softly. Catherine left you a letter. She wrote it years ago and updated it regularly, hoping that someday you might get to read it. He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a cream-colored envelope with my name written on it in elegant script. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely take it from him. Inside was several pages of expensive stationery covered in the same beautiful handwriting. My dearest Brittany, it began. If you are reading this, then I am gone, and you are learning the truth about who you really are. I want you to know that giving you up was the hardest thing I ever did, but I was 17 and alone, and I thought I was giving you the chance at a normal family life that I couldn't provide. I stopped reading, tears blurring my vision. Richard quietly pushed a box of tissues across the desk. I know this is overwhelming, he said. Take your time. I wiped my eyes and continued reading. Catherine wrote about watching me from a distance as I grew up, about being proud of my independence and creativity. She wrote about wanting to reach out but respecting the life I'd built. She wrote about leaving me everything because she believed I would use it wisely, with kindness and compassion. I know you probably feel like you don't deserve this, the letter continued. Like you're not worthy of such responsibility. But I've watched you your entire life, and I know better. You have a strength that comes from surviving things that would break other people. You have a kindness that exists despite being shown very little kindness yourself. You are extraordinary, even if no one has ever told you that before. By the time I finished reading, I was crying openly. Not just from grief for the mother I'd never known, but from something else. Recognition. For the first time in my life, someone understood me completely. What happens now? I asked, my voice thick with tears. Now, Richard said, you decide what you want to do with the rest of your life. You're one of the wealthiest women in the country, Miss Thompson. You can do anything you want. I thought about the laundry room, about the paper plate, and the cold turkey. About a lifetime of being told I wasn't good enough, wasn't worthy, wasn't important. The people who raised me, I said slowly, do they know about any of this?
No.
Catherine specifically requested that they never be contacted about the adoption or your inheritance. As far as they know, you are their biological daughter, and this inheritance is completely unrelated to them. I nodded, pieces of a plan already starting to form in my mind. For 25 years, I'd been living someone else's idea of who I was supposed to be. For 25 years, I'd been made to feel small and insignificant and grateful for scraps. That was about to change. I returned to my parents' house 3 hours later, but this time I drove myself. The limousine had dropped me off at my apartment, where I'd sat in silence for an hour, staring at the legal documents that proved everything Richard had told me was real. Bank statements with numbers that didn't seem possible. Property deeds for buildings I'd seen on postcards. Stock certificates for companies whose names I recognized from billboards and commercials. Catherine Ashford had been my biological mother. And now I was Catherine Ashford's heir. The Thanksgiving dinner was clearly over. Cars were gone from the driveway except for Madison's BMW and my parents' sedan. Through the living room window, I could see them all huddled together on the couch, probably dissecting every detail of what had happened earlier. Probably coming up with theories about what kind of trouble I'd gotten myself into. I knocked on the front door this time instead of using my key. I wanted them to open it, to see me standing there, to make the choice to let me in. My mother answered, her face immediately flooding with relief and worry and curiosity all at once. "Brittany, thank God. We've been so worried. What was that all about? Are you in some kind of trouble? Can I come in?" She stepped aside, and I walked into the living room where Madison and my father were waiting. Trevor was nowhere to be seen, probably went home to avoid the family drama. "Well," Madison demanded before I'd even sat down.
What did they want?
"Who were those people?" I looked at her sitting there on the edge of the couch, practically vibrating with the need to know everything. My perfect sister who had never had to wonder if she belonged, never had to question whether she was loved, never had to eat dinner alone in a laundry room. "It was about an inheritance," I said simply. The word hung in the air like smoke. My father frowned, my mother tilted her head in confusion, and Madison's eyes sharpened with interest. "An inheritance from who?" my father asked. "Your grandmother died years ago, and she didn't have anything to leave." "Not from Grandma," I said. "From someone else." Madison leaned forward. "Brittany, stop being cryptic. Who died and left you money?" I could have told them everything right then. Could have explained about Catherine Ashford, about the adoption, about the billions of dollars that were now mine. Could have watched their faces change as they realized that the daughter they discarded was now wealthier than they could ever imagine. But I didn't. "It's complicated," I said instead. "I'm still processing it all." "How much money are we talking about?" Madison pressed. "A few thousand? Enough to pay off your student loans." The assumption in her voice was so typical. Of course, any inheritance I might receive would be small, insignificant. Of course it wouldn't be anything important. "Enough," I said. My mother sat down across from me, her face creased with worry. "Honey, you seem different. Are you sure you're okay? You're not in any kind of legal trouble, are you?" Legal trouble. Even now, even when someone had come to give me good news, their first instinct was to assume I'd done something wrong. "I'm not in trouble, Mom." "Then what's going on?" my father asked, his voice taking on that authoritative tone he used when he wanted answers. "Those weren't ordinary lawyers, Brittany. That was a very expensive firm. Very high profile. People like that don't just show up unless something big is happening."
He was right about that.
Something big was happening. Something that would change everything. "I know," I said. "And I'll tell you more when I know more. But right now, I just wanted to come back and finish Thanksgiving dinner with my family." The lie came easily. I didn't want to finish dinner with them. I didn't want to pretend that sitting in the laundry room was acceptable. I didn't want to smile and act grateful for their scraps. But I wanted to see them. I wanted to watch them try to be nice to me now that they thought I might have come into some money. I wanted to see how quickly their treatment of me would change when they thought I might be useful. "Of course," my mother said quickly. "Of course you should finish dinner. Madison, clear some space at the table." Madison shot me a look, but got up to rearrange the dining room. Suddenly, there was room for me at the real table, with the real china and the real conversation. "I'll heat up a fresh plate," my mother continued, bustling toward the kitchen. "The turkey might be a little dry, but there's plenty of everything else." My father settled back into his chair, studying me with the same expression he used to wear when I was a teenager, and he was trying to figure out if I was lying about something. "You know, Brittany," he said slowly, "if you've come into some money, you should be smart about it. Talk to a financial advisor. Make sure you're not making any rash decisions." "That's good advice, Dad. Madison could help you," he continued. "She deals with legal matters all the time. She knows how these things work." Of course. Even now, even when I was the one with something they wanted to know about, Madison was the one who should be in charge of it. I'll keep that in mind. Madison came back from the dining room, and I could see the wheels turning in her head. She was already calculating, already planning how she could insert herself into whatever was happening. "You know," she said, sitting down next to me, "family should help family. If you need any advice about handling legal documents or understanding contracts, I'd be happy to take a look." For free, of course. Out of the goodness of her heart. Not because she was suddenly interested in being helpful after spending the day making me eat in the laundry room. "That's really generous of you, Madison." My mother returned with a plate piled high with turkey and stuffing and cranberry sauce. She set it down in front of me with a kind of attention she usually reserved for Madison's achievements. "There you go, sweetheart. And I made fresh coffee if you want some." Sweetheart. When was the last time she'd called me sweetheart? I ate slowly, savoring every bite. Not because the food was good, it was the same dry turkey I'd eaten earlier. But because for the first time in my life, I was the one they were all watching. I was the one they were all trying to please. And I hadn't even told them anything yet. As I ate, they peppered me with careful questions. How was I feeling? Did I need anything? Was there anything they could do to help? The same people who had banished me to the laundry room 3 hours earlier were now treating me like honored guest. I answered their questions politely but vaguely, giving them just enough information to keep them interested, but not enough to satisfy their curiosity. I could see the frustration building in Madison's eyes, the way it always did when she couldn't control a situation. When I finished eating, I stood up and thanked them for dinner. "You're leaving again?" my mother asked, and I could hear the disappointment in her voice. Not because she would miss me, but because she still didn't know what she wanted to know. "I have a lot to think about," I said. "And some phone calls to make." "Phone calls to who?" Madison asked. I smiled at her, the same polite smile I'd been giving people all my life when they asked questions I didn't want to answer. "I'll be in touch soon," I said. "Thanks for dinner." As I walked to my car, I could feel them watching me from the window. Tomorrow, I would start making decisions about my new life. About what I wanted to do with Catherine Ashford's empire, about where I wanted to live, about who I wanted to become. But tonight, I just wanted to go home and sit in the quiet of my apartment, knowing that I would never have to eat in anyone's laundry room ever again. 1 year later, I stood in the living room of my penthouse apartment, looking out at the city skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. The view was breathtaking, the kind of view that used to exist only in magazines and movies for someone like me. Now, it was just my Tuesday morning. The apartment was everything my old studio wasn't: spacious, elegant, filled with natural light and beautiful things that I'd chosen simply because I loved them. Original artwork hung on the walls, not because it was expensive, but because it spoke to something deep in my soul. The furniture was comfortable and welcoming, the kind of place where real conversations happened over good wine and home-cooked meals. I'd kept my promise to Catherine. I'd used her gift wisely. Ashford Industries was thriving under my leadership, but I'd made changes. We'd expanded into sustainable technology and affordable housing projects. I'd started a foundation that provided art supplies and classes to underprivileged kids, remembering what it felt like to have a talent that no one valued. Every decision I made, I asked myself what Catherine would think, what she would want her legacy to become. My phone buzzed with a text message. The name on the screen made me pause. Madison. Haven't heard from you in months. Mom's birthday is next week. Will you be there? I stared at the message for a long moment, remembering last year's birthday dinner. The frantic phone calls that had started the week after I'd left their house on Thanksgiving. The sudden invitations to family dinners. The way my mother had started ending phone calls with "I love you" like she was trying to make up for 25 years of not saying it. I'd gone to a few of those dinners in the beginning, curious to see how they would treat me, wondering if anything had really changed. And for a while, it seemed like it had. They asked about my work, complimented my clothes, insisted I sit at the head of the table. My mother started cooking my favorite foods instead of just Madison's. My father began including me in conversations about current events and business, actually listening to my opinions. But I could see through it all. The sudden attention wasn't because they'd realized they loved me. It was because they thought I had something they wanted. They still didn't know about Catherine or the real extent of my inheritance, but they knew it was significant enough to change their behavior. The breaking point had come 6 months ago, at Madison's birthday dinner. After a few glasses of wine, she'd finally worked up the courage to ask directly. "So, Britt," she'd said, using that nickname I hated, "you never did tell us exactly how much money we're talking about. I mean, I could help you invest it properly. Make sure you're maximizing your returns." The assumption that I needed her help. The expectation that I should share my private financial information with people who had spent my entire life making me feel worthless. The casual greed disguised as family concern. "I'm managing fine on my own," I'd said. "But are you really?" My father had chimed in. "I mean, no offense, honey, but you've never dealt with serious money before. It's easy to make mistakes that could cost you everything." That's when I'd realized nothing had actually changed. They still saw me as the incompetent little sister who needed their guidance. They still believed they knew better than I did about everything. The only difference was that now they wanted something from me. I'd stopped accepting their dinner invitations after that. The phone buzzed again. Another text from Madison. "Mom really misses you. We all do." I set the phone down without responding and walked to my home office, where I had actual important work to do. The foundation was launching a new program next month that would provide college scholarships to students who, like me, had never been their family's first priority. The application essays I'd been reading were heartbreaking and inspiring. Kids who had overcome rejection and neglect to become extraordinary. Kids who understood that sometimes the family you're born into isn't the family you're meant to have. Around noon, my assistant Elena knocked on the office door. She was a brilliant young woman I'd hired away from a competing firm, someone who understood that loyalty was earned, not demanded. "Ms. Thompson, your 3 o'clock appointment is here early. Should I ask him to wait?" I glanced at my calendar.
Dr.
James Mitchell, the director of the Children's Hospital where we were building a new pediatric wing. One of the good ones, someone who genuinely cared about helping kids, not about getting his name on a building. "Send him in." "And Elena? Could you clear my schedule for Thursday afternoon? I want to visit the construction site." "Of course." "Oh, and you have 17 missed calls from someone named Madison Thompson. Should I add her to your blocked list?" I smiled. Elena was protective of my time and peace of mind in a way that felt genuinely caring, not possessive. "Not yet. But don't put her calls through unless I specifically ask you to." After Dr. Mitchell left, I spent the afternoon reviewing proposals for the foundation's next project. I'd learned that having money wasn't just about what you could buy for yourself. It was about the power to make real change in the world. To be the person for other people that no one had ever been for me. As evening approached, I poured myself a glass of wine and returned to the living room windows. The city was lighting up below me, millions of people living their lives, pursuing their dreams, building their own families. My phone rang. Not a text this time, but an actual call. My mother's name appeared on the screen. I let it ring 4 times before answering. "Hi, Mom." "Brittany, sweetheart, I was just thinking about you. How are you doing?" Sweetheart again. The endearment that had appeared the moment they thought I might have money. "I'm doing well. How are you?" "Oh, you know, same old, same old. Your father's golf game is improving. Madison just got another promotion at the firm. She's doing so well." Of course she was. Madison was always doing well. That's nice to hear. "Listen, honey, I was hoping you might come to my birthday dinner next week. The whole family will be there, and it's been so long since we've all been together.
The whole family.
As if I had ever really been part of it. I'm not sure I'll be able to make it, Mom. I have some work commitments. Work commitments? Surely you can take one evening off for your mother's birthday. There it was. The guilt, the expectation, the assumption that my life should revolve around their convenience. I'll see what I can do, I said, knowing I wouldn't. I hope you will, sweetheart. And Brittany? I've been thinking that maybe it's time we had a real conversation about your situation. Your inheritance. As a family, we should probably discuss how to handle it responsibly. Handle it responsibly. As if I hadn't been handling it responsibly for the past year. As if I hadn't built it into something even larger and more meaningful than Catherine had imagined. There's nothing to discuss, Mom. I'm handling everything just fine. But honey, family should help family. We're here for you if you need us. Family should help family. The same words Madison had used when she'd tried to insert herself into my legal affairs. The same sentiment that had been completely absent when I was the one who needed help. I appreciate that, I said. But I really do have everything under control. After I hung up, I sat in the gathering darkness of my apartment, holding my wine glass and thinking about the year that had passed. I thought about Catherine Ashford, the mother I'd never known but who had understood me better than the people who raised me. I thought about the foundation, about the kids whose lives were changing because someone finally believed in them. I thought about the choice I'd made to step away from people who only valued me when they thought I could benefit them. My phone buzzed with one more text from Madison. Fine. Be stubborn. But don't expect us to keep reaching out forever. I read it twice, then deleted it. They were wrong about one thing. I wasn't being stubborn. I was being free. Outside my windows, the city sparkled with possibilities. Tomorrow, I would continue building the life Catherine had made possible for me. I would help more kids find their voices, fund more programs that made a real difference, use my resources to create the kind of world where everyone had a seat at the table. And I would do it all without ever again sitting in someone else's laundry room, grateful for scraps from people who had never deserved my gratitude in the first place. The family I'd been born into had taught me what I didn't want to become. The family I'd chosen, my employees, the kids in my programs, the people who worked beside me to make the world a little better, had taught me what love actually looked like. It looked like respect. Like seeing someone's worth without needing them to prove it. Like showing up not when it was convenient, but when it mattered. I'd found my family. And this time, everyone had a place at the table.